Welcome to Putback on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we're here to cover all things Knicks and the NBA with you over the next half hour or so. Got two great guests with me today. First, have CP, the Fanchise, Knicks Fan TV. You probably know him well. Does a great job with a bunch of Knicks fans talking about the game every night and throughout the week. Got Brendan Brown, longtime NBA coach, scout, also a TV analyst, knows the game like the back of his hand. So we're going to really break things down all over the Knicks roster over the next 30 minutes. But before we get into it, be sure to leave any questions you might have in the replies wherever you're watching, because we'll get to those questions later in the show. Right now, we're going to get started with the baseline. Knicks coming off of a tough home loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers, up 13 late in the third quarter, and that lead just shriveled away with Darius Garland going off, Knicks offense bogging down. But let's start with Karl-Anthony Towns, guys. Karl Towns, 8 field goal attempts against Cleveland. Brendan, to you first, what did you make of Towns last night, his shots, where they came from, how he looked in the offense?
Well, I think when you're looking at Towns so far in the 3 games, he's taking less than 10 shots a game. And he didn't play a ton in that opening night game at Boston. But that being said, you look at what happened last night, where Bridges got a lot more looks, Hart got some more looks. This is going to be a little bit of an interesting scenario for the starting group. For Jalen Brunson, you got to kind of figure he's looking for Towns first, but Bridges, Anunoby, and Hart will also all want to get shots. And you look at a game like Friday night against Indiana, you know, the starting lineup was fantastic. 4 guys got tons of shots, but usually in the NBA, it's only 3 guys who can get a lot of attempts on any given night.
CP, alarming to you to see 8 attempts from Karl Towns against Cleveland?
No, not in the third game of the season. This is going to take some time for this Knicks team to figure each other out, gain some chemistry, get healthy as well. Just as Brendan said, this is new territory for the Knicks. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns came from Minnesota, where it was between him and Anthony Edwards who got the bulk of the offensive load. But on any given night with the Knicks, it can go from Brunson to Towns to Bridges or maybe even OG Anunoby. But one thing's for sure is that when you look at Jalen Brunson's passes last night, and shout out to Alan Hahn for this, 6 of his 54 passes went to Karl-Anthony Towns. That's way too little. We need to see more of a 2-man game between those 2 guys. And what Towns is bringing as a potential 3-point shooter, we have to understand that he needs to be set up more often than not. You're going from Julius Randle, who at his assisted rate was in the 50s to maybe high 60s, to Karl-Anthony Towns, who's in the high 60s to high 70s. So he needs to be set up more. You need to see a bit more cohesiveness with Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's for Tom Thibodeau to figure out.
Hey, you know what? You got a story on SNY.TV if you want to check it out. You got Jalen Brunson's reaction to Towns' shots, and he said, I thought the right things. He said, it's on me, it's on us to make sure that everybody eats. So he said the right thing there, and I agree with you guys. It's early on. These guys are working out the kinks, getting used to playing with one another. But a big part of this season, Brendan, will be that Towns-Brunson pick and roll. What have you seen from it so far, and what are defenses doing against it that's worked and maybe hasn't worked?
Well, I think defensively, the Knicks have already seen a couple of different things against that. Now, what have they seen the most that's worked against them the most is probably the switching that Cleveland did a lot of last night. You saw that in the Boston game on opening night, where they generally switch in a lot of different ways. So what does that make it all come down to? What happened in the game last night? Well, Jared Allen ended up on Brunson quite a bit. And he would play back off him, and Jalen would pick a side, left or right, to try to attack him. And I think that Jalen got some decent shots in the paint. But in general terms, he was really having to work hard on trying to, negotiate a 7-foot guy. The other part to that we've seen in the first 3 games is that when Towns draws a switch, what exactly is he doing? Because he's one of the only Knick players right now not to be shooting very well from 2-point range. And that's the back end of what you're getting. If a guard switches onto a pick and pop with Towns, and then Towns is forced to come inside 15 feet and operate in that area, is he getting quality shots? Is he getting himself fouled? Is he getting himself to the foul line? Is he drawing other defense to get an assist? And so I think the Brunson part of this very much will work out. But in the Towns part of it, can he be more efficient taking advantage of the switch?
Yeah, it's something definitely to keep an eye on early on this season. You know, you look at Towns, you look at Brunson, such big pieces of this thing to start out. But I also want to talk about OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and specifically CP. Offensively, what have you seen from those two so far? Met your standards, left something to be desired? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, starting with Mikal Bridges, you have to love his aggressiveness, rebounding from that first half in Boston. You know, from the second half in Boston straight through, offensively, he's been there for the Knicks and shooting the ball very efficiently. He seems to like that baseline fadeaway jumper. So let's see if the Knicks continue to run some more plays for him there. Defensively, he's been very good and playing at a high level for the Knicks. OG Anunoby as well. You know, last night, Cleveland really tried at times to run him off of the three-point line. And so you're seeing OG Anunoby get into his mid-range bag. He had a nice play where they had Darius Garland switched on to him. He caught it in the post, spun in between Garland and Dean Wade and got in there for a layup. And so it was kind of unfortunate that in the fourth quarter, the offense kind of boggled down and neither one of those guys was able to really get going in the second half. And I thought that's part of where the Knicks got into a little bit of trouble.
A lot of talk after the game, CP and Brendan, about the three-point shooting. Knicks made it a point of emphasis to get these shots up night in and night out. It hasn't really happened yet. They are, I think, maybe bottom third, definitely bottom half in three-point attempts per 100 possessions. So early, though, through three games. Brendan, what's not happening that should allow the Knicks to get more three-point looks? What's limiting their attempts from there so far?
Well, I think if you look at where they were on night one and then move forward from there, it's a situation you're not going to get up necessarily a ton of three-point looks against Boston, and then against Indiana, you absolutely are not, because you can score via the two and getting to the foul line against Indiana. So that's a little bit of the math that's involved here. We've only played 3 games. I think that Cleveland's half-court defense, when it was in the half-court last night, was good. I think what CP said about, the guys on the weak side, whether they're in the arc, whether they're in the corner, they got run off the line, or they took a very rushed, hurried, weak side corner 3. And I think that's a difficult situation to start being in a groove, start being in a rhythm for that starting group. It's not like you're just going to take threes to take threes or take bad threes. Like, I don't think that's what Tibbs is looking for. So for me, I'm a little bit more concerned, not so much about the 3 as I am where they're getting to the foul line, because they're at the very, very bottom of the league at the foul line in terms of attempts. And when you have Brunson, you have Towns, and right now Hart's getting 5 free throw attempts a game, that should be a category, A, that will help your offense, B, will help set up your defense when you're coming back the other way. Because the Knicks are still having some problems with this first group when they get run back on. You saw it in the Boston game, the Indiana game, and in a key part of the Cleveland game last night.
And also, Ian, in Tom Thibodeau's press conference last night after the loss, he talked about getting enough paint touches more driving sprays, and he didn't see a lot of that last night in the Knicks game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that's a lot. It's going to rely on Jalen Brunson, and also when you get to the bench units, Cameron Payne, who's that backup point guard, getting some dribble penetration and then being able to spray it out to open shooters. I don't think the Knicks got enough of that last night. They are last in the NBA in three-point attempts. We talked about Karl-Anthony Towns' low shooting volume, but also the Knicks need to figure out how to get Jalen Brunson more three-point shots within rhythm off the ball, because those two guys are going to be their best three-point shooters on volume, and they need to be able to get those guys going offensively from the perimeter.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that early on last night, I thought Brunson was off the ball a decent amount. Didn't produce the three-point attempts that CP's referencing, but they did have him off the ball. And Tom Thibodeau, he doesn't say much after games, but I thought he was also saying about those three-point attempts that it's on the players around the arc to space properly, to find the proper spots when somebody's driving, to allow the driver to make the best read possible. So, these are things that I think you could really expect early on in this season for a Knicks team that has so many new faces, so many important new faces. So I think it's silly to kind of overanalyze what we're seeing here, but you certainly, I think, in a perfect world, want to see those three-point attempts increase. And we talked about Josh Hart, guys. So let's segue a little bit quickly to the injuries here that the Knicks are dealing with. Josh Hart, it seemed like he took a really, really hard shot to the calf there, to the shin, pardon me. It was like a high velocity impact collision with Karis LeVert. He was hurt, and he's tough. So when he comes out of the game, you know that it's significant. I would assume that he doesn't practice today. I don't know if he'll be in Miami to play on Wednesday, or he'll be sidelined. But if he's sidelined, this is a test for the Knicks' depth early on. You're down a starter. I would assume Deuce McBride slides in there, and then kind of what do you do off the bench? So the heart injury, it could be costly. And again, we don't know if he's going to play Wednesday or not, but it seemed like a pretty significant shot there. And when you look at also Jalen Brunson, he was fine after the game. He landed a little funny on one of his drives, but he said afterward that he was okay. So that's good injury news. But Hart, obviously he's not going to get up a ton of threes, but I think he's been pretty effective in his role in this starting five more often than not so far. Brendan, what have you observed about Hart in this new role for him?
I got to go back to the last question. And we're asking about how the Knicks are going to do this and do that and do this and do that. How about we give a little bit of credit to Cleveland's defense and the fact that they shut them down time after time after time in the fourth quarter, and there weren't a lot of good shots to be had for. So you're not going to see a lot of great defensive, units in the league, but let's give Cleveland a little bit of credit last night. And they did a nice job on Jalen Brunson. As for tomorrow night with Hart, I don't think in Game 4 you can ask someone, hey, let's stick it out, let's play it out. You do have Tyler Hero to think about. You do have Jimmy Butler to think about. There are other situations where they play different lineups. They could have four smalls in there. So, yeah, you'd love to have him, but he only missed one game last year. They talked about that on TV, and that he was questionable coming into the game anyway, and, ended up playing and had a nice night. So it's going to be kind of interesting to me in these situations, any of the five starters, like if they have a 50-50 situation of playing, when you don't have a Chua right now and you only have 12 guys overall, will they play Dadier to play some minutes? I think the German was fantastic in his minutes last night. That gives them someone else they could soak up some minutes with. But, how exactly are you going to do it when you only have 12? And this is going to come up, not a little bit, this is going to come up a lot this season.
Interesting to me, too, that, you haven't seen it yet, but the Knicks have an option there to play Karl-Anthony Towns with another big, whether it's Sims or Porty. I understand why you wouldn't go there because, neither of those guys have shown that they can produce consistently in bigger minutes. But, it just makes me wonder what happens down the road here, too, if Mitchell Robinson comes back healthy and is still a Knick. Which way do you go? Do you go Towns at the 5? Do you go Robinson at the 5? A question for further down the line. But, CP, how do you see that playing out if Robinson does come back healthy?
Yeah, it certainly is tough to lose Hart last night, in a double-double, because I think he showed you last night why he's so critical for this team and such an important piece in this starting lineup, because despite the fact that they are short on the front court, he allows them to play big while still playing small. Just his ability to get after it on the boards. They had 11 offensive rebounds in the first half last night, and then he goes down in crunch time, and Cleveland was kind of able to take over in the paint. And so his loss will certainly be felt by this Knicks team. But going forward, Mitchell Robinson, when I'm watching Huck Porty's minutes last night and very impressed with the way he's going, I'm thinking about, man, if they have Mitchell Robinson, they'll be even better. With his ability to potentially come off the bench and help the Knicks defensively and get after it on the offensive boards, or in a potential Twin Towers setting with Karl-Anthony Towns playing the 4, Mitchell Robinson at the 5. You look at it last night, maybe a Mitchell Robinson playing the 5 there helps the Knicks kind of tango with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, because that's been the Knicks' calling card in terms of their success against this Cavaliers team in the past, is their ability to get after it on the boards, control the glass, be physical with Allen and Mobley. But last night, it was the Cleveland bigs that really took over in the second half of that game. So I think as soon as Knicks can come back and be in good shape, that'll certainly help this Knicks team as they tread forward in the second half of the season.
Brendan Brown, how do you approach that now and when Mitch comes back? What would you do there if you were making decisions? Would you start Mitch if he was fully conditioned and ready to play that amount of minutes, or would you bring him off the bench? How would you do it?
First of all, being an assistant coach for a little while and on some coaching staffs, we would not be talking about this until the day before it was going to happen. Like, we would not be going months out saying, hey, this is what's definitely going to happen, because so many other things could happen between now and that scenario. Now, I think you got to give it a lot of thought as to, and this could be popular. We're just talking a lot about offense, who's getting shot attempts, is it balanced? If you bring Mitch into the lineup, you can put Hart back on the bench. That would probably help out that scenario. There are a lot of good things to think about. But in reality, what is Mitch going to be like when he comes back? Let's go back to last year. The second game that Mitch came back, Tibbs played him 23 minutes, and he was trying to guard Len Biana at the three-point line. Like, was that the best case scenario for Mitch coming back? So, even though you might want to mess around or look at it that way with Towns and Mitch, like, what kind of condition is Mitch going to be in? Who says that he can play 24 minutes as the starting center when he first comes back? And that's why Hugh Bordy last night doing a nice job and being much better than Sims gives you a little bit more flavor, a little bit more excitement about that situation. And in reality, I think that's what the Knicks should be doing right now. If they got to play Dadier a lot right now, just play him. Now, I know they've had better success in these last 2 games playing 8 guys. I get that, because all 8 guys know what to do. But you're kind of in a situation right now. If you feel there's an open tryout situation, did we all know that Bordy was going to be really good last night? No, we didn't, and it happened. So if you've got to do that with Dadier or someone like a Kolek or whoever, it's early in the year, and this is the time to do it.
Brendan, I'm going to come back to you because I really need to know, actually. Mitch, fully healthy, fully conditioned. What are you doing? Bench, starter?
Mitch?
Yeah.
Dude, Mitch is my guy. I've been talking about him, I told you, since his rookie year. It's the only good thing that happened this year. I used to yell M-Rob every time he got a block shot. This is what I'm concerned about. They say in terms of sports science, trying to get him in shape, he has 2 bad feet/ankles. So when you try to get someone in shape the right way and do it this way, and Mitch is going to cover 280, 285, 290. I want to, Ian, just see him get back on the floor. That's the only thing I'm worried about at this point. You can go different ways, but is he going to be ready to play 24 minutes as the starting center? And I'm just really not sure if we'll ever know that.
All right, fair enough. We'll let you dodge it for now. We're going to go to our What We Learned segment shortly, but before we get to that, be sure to keep your questions coming in, fan questions, put them in the replies. We will get to them later on the show. But for What We Learned, it's presented by SUNY Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. And you visit binghamton.edu for more information. We're getting into Ariel Hukporti about what we learned because of the minutes that he played last night, playing ahead of Jericho Sims, ahead of a healthy Jericho Sims. So we learned at least that Tom Thibodeau wants to take a look at Hukporti in that role, and Thibodeau said he did pretty well there. So you're looking at a potential rotation role early on here for Hukporti at the backup five. When you guys look big picture, CP backup five, do you trust what you're seeing so far from a Hukporti or a Sims? Are you desperate for the Knicks to go out and get somebody? I know it's early to make these kind of proclamations, but what is your gut so far?
Yeah, I think with the restrictions from a salary cap standpoint, second apron standpoint, I think the Knicks are going to have to look for development and improvement from within. And from what we saw last night with Ariel Hukporti getting, I believe it was like 7 straight minutes in that second quarter, the first player off the bench in the second half, and then crunch time minutes was subbing in for Karl-Anthony Towns. I think you are looking at the backup center until at least Precious Achiuwa comes back. And Hukporti's been impressive, man. I've got a chance to take a look at him in the summer league and now, and he's got a good feel for the game. His hustle is always on 100, and he's just active, man. And that's what you want out of your backup big man. He's been great there. I think you're going to be looking at the backup five going forward. Tibbs said he wanted to give him a look. It wasn't because Sims was injured, but overall, it seems like Sims has kind of reached a certain ceiling here where Hukporti and his activity will certainly help the Knicks off the bench.
Brendan, Jericho Sims, what has he shown you so far? Do you understand why Tibbs wanted to take a look at Hukporti over Sims late against Cleveland?
2 years ago, Sims was very much the backup center. He was a very good runner. He's a very mobile defender. His drawback is that even when he gets an offensive rebound, if he can't, jam it, and he has to make a move to try to get it to the board, he has an inability to do so. And he hasn't gotten much better at it over the years. He can catch right at the corner of the board, and he can't score. He gets a good offensive rebounding opportunity. He could just do one dribble and lay it in the basket, and he turns around, he passes out the three. You like the fact that he has a hustle contingent about himself and he can rebound, but if you're a complete zero as an offensive player, even as a dribble handoff guy and whatever, that's not going to get you very far in a game like last night that's a high-level NBA game. Hukporti, really quickly, in the summer league, he can really catch the ball. You go pick and roll, throw the ball to him inside, he will catch it. He has a great set of hands. The two things I liked about him in the game last night, he was up top as the trailer. He was dictating the offense. He wasn't just being scared up there. He was pointing and looking for cutters. And then naturally, the drive and the dunk in the teeth of a very big game, the fact that he made it was awesome. But the other part that was great about it is that he did it. He tried to do it in the teeth of the game. It was awesome.
Shows confidence, shows comfort. I agree with you, Brendan. Speaking of Hukporti, there was a clip of Miles McBride in one of the earlier games telling Hukporti, hey, go hard in these garbage minutes. This is how you earn Tom Thibodeau's trust. It was I thought it was very cool to hear that sideline conversation. And Deuce McBride playing pretty well so far this season, strong preseason, strong early in the regular season. Obviously, defensively, had a tough time with Darius Garland late again in that Cleveland game. But by and large, it seems like we're watching a player take yet another step here in Miles McBride coming off the Knicks bench. CP, your thoughts on McBride's performance and his role?
Yeah, I mean, that clip was great because no one knows more than Deuce McBride about earning Tom Thibodeau's trust. I mean, his journey so far has been remarkable, in and out of the G League, situational minutes for the Knicks in his early rookie season and sophomore year. But then, last year you saw where he was a big part in the second half for the Knicks, starting games, coming off the bench, whatever role they needed from him. Deuce McBride was able to fill that very, very well. And so it's so funny because when you looked at this team, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we always talked about the Knicks young players and the Knicks kids, I don't think anyone knew that Miles McBride would kind of be the last man standing, if you will. But he is here, and he's filled a great void, probably the best contract in the NBA as compared to value. And what I see about with Deuce McBride is just being a star in his role. His shot selection has been excellent. His efficiency from the floor, all 3 levels he's able to score the ball. I mean, Deuce McBride has been excellent for this Knicks team. And with the departure of Dante DiVincenzo, you need that offensive firepower off of the bench from Deuce McBride. And he's the guy that Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks are going to trust off of the bench. Now, last night he had some trouble keeping Darius Garland in front of him. 21 points in the second half for Darius Garland in that loss to the Cavs. So, his on-ball defense was a little tough. But, between Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, it's going to be a tough night for most players.
Yeah, and Brendan, you've watched McBride since he's come into the league, probably even before that. What stood out to you in terms of his progression going all the way back to year one when Derrick Rose was here to now?
I think the one thing that he's always done, and it goes back to the beginning of his rookie year, is he has a tendency to never turn the ball over. And I think part of that is that he was a very safe passer at times. And now he's expanding his game a little bit more. So he is turning it over a little bit more, but you'll take that because he's making more good passes and reading plays a little bit better to create a better shot, maybe for someone else. Right now, he's off to a great start shooting the ball 3 games. Okay, it's 3 games, but obviously in Boston, he had a good night. And I think what it comes down to is this. Knicks fans get all whacked out about McBride. I mean, he is a good player. Like CP said, you got Payne, you got him, and then when Achua comes back, if 2 or 3 of those guys can be solid on any given night offensively, then the Knicks can be in good shape with the 5 guys that are in this starting lineup. Where it all comes down to is, can McBride guard first unit players? If you're worried about beating Boston and Philadelphia, can he guard Holiday? Can he guard Derek White? Can he guard Maxey? Can he guard any of those people? And the answer pretty much is no, he cannot. But the reality of it is Tom used them last night for a specific situation and was willing to give him a shot last night. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But then maybe the next time you play Cleveland, it does work out because you have a little bit better familiarity. And that's the edge of where we are with McBride. We know he's going to score some points off the bench, but can he enter your best lineups out on the floor and have a good matchup?
Yeah, it's an open question, and it's certainly something that I'm sure we're going to be keeping an eye on all year. And so far, he's looked pretty strong to me offensively. But we talk about the roster, we talk about the rotation. One thing to note here on potential roster moves is Landry Shamet, right? I think that the rehab so far has gone well. We noted early on that there was optimism that he could avoid surgery. That optimism is still there. And the Knicks drafting Shamet and Matt Ryan in the G League draft, the Westchester Knicks, that is. And that was for Shamet's purposes to get him rehabbing with the team, to allow the team to monitor his rehab. So yeah, I would still expect when he's ready to go, or maybe shortly before he's ready to go, the Knicks signing him to a standard NBA contract. We talked about Ariel Hukporti a lot today, and I do think that still most likely that he gets converted from his current 2-way contract to a standard deal too, and that would get the Knicks up to 14 players on the roster, and that would get them to a place where they are satisfying NBA roster rules. But Shamet, I don't think he'd be like ready to come back by November 5th, and that's the date where the Knicks have to get up to 14 in order to be in compliance with the NBA roster rules. So I think there on November 5th, I think you're looking at Hukporti and maybe somebody else, maybe Matt Ryan, because Matt Ryan is a guy the Knicks are really high on, drafting him again in that G League draft. Tom Thibodeau said Monday night that he loves him as a shooter, and they need that. So I would think Matt Ryan will get a look on the roster, and then, you'll save a spot for Landry Shamet once he's healthy. And Ryan ultimately could be a two-way guy if he's not brought in on that traditional contract initially. So just some roster moves to keep an eye on in the next few days and weeks here. And I do think in a general sense, this team, this is not the final product of this group that's going to go out and try to compete for a title this season and in years moving forward. I think this roster will change a bit at some point throughout the season, whether it's weeks before the trade deadline or at the trade deadline. But keep an eye on Shamet, Ryan, and Hukporti in the near future. Now we're going to get to final thoughts, guys. I want to hear from you about the Eastern Conference. Brendan Brown, what are your thoughts early on? Knicks saw a tough Cleveland team at home Monday night. Who else is out there for the Knicks who's lurking for this Knicks team? Who's going to be competing with this Knicks team at the East? And not necessarily Philly or Boston, because we know about those two, but other teams that you're interested in.
I'm only going to bring up one team in the East. And I heard someone say this like a week ago, and I'm like, get out of here. What are you talking about? And they said Orlando potentially could play Boston in the conference finals. Now, I don't remember where I heard this or who said it, but I watch a lot of Orlando, and now they're a little bit better with KCP and everything else. And I would say Miami's kind of trudging along. Milwaukee's struggling. Indiana isn't off to a great start right now. Philadelphia has the injuries. You might want to start looking at Orlando because they have a very good 10 guys, and they have a little bit more depth past 10, 11 and 12 to fill in. And, when Banchero goes for 50 last night, and they're a little bit better and a little bit tougher than they were last year, I'd keep my eyes on them quite a bit.
Very good defensively, too, that Orlando team. Certainly going to keep an eye on things down in Florida. Brendan Brown, thank you for that. It's a great point. CPU, what are you looking at? Who are you looking at in terms of teams that could sneak up on the Knicks, could be right there with the Knicks as we go through this season?
Yeah, I agree with Brendan. Certainly Orlando, you look at Paolo Banchero, 31 first half points last night in their win over the Pacers. And as we talked about three-point shooting, a big theme on today's show, Orlando, even though it's 4 games, they've moved up to the top 5 in terms of three-point attempts and three-point makes. Last year, they were a bottom dweller in that category. And so it seems like Jamal Mosley wants these guys to let it fly a little bit. And then you're seeing more maturation from Paolo Banchero. But I'm going to take a look at the team that the Knicks lost to last night, 110-104 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is a team that has their core back in their backcourt with Mobley and with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Their front court, there's a lot of expectations for Evan Mobley. He's played well last night. Jared Allen also playing well there. The expectation that Kenny Atkinson offensively can unlock these guys and get both Garland and Mitchell going simultaneously for this team. I think this team is going to be another tough out in the East. The last 2 regular seasons, they've been a top team in terms of wins. So let's see if Kenny Atkinson can help these guys bring it all together, because if he can, this will be a dangerous team in the East.
CP, I'm with you on Cleveland. Just quickly there, we were talking to Kenny Atkinson before the game in New York on Monday, and he was talking about how he's such a different coach now than he was in Brooklyn, and he said that was because of his time as an assistant in Golden State with Steve Kerr, with the Clippers, with Ty Lue, and just picking things up from both of those guys, whether it was parts of Golden State's offense or how Ty Lue tries to hunt matchups on the offensive end. And he said he really learned a lot from those two. He's a different coach coming into Cleveland, so I think he's going to be a big boost for that Cavs team as well. But that's it for this segment with my friend Brendan Brown and my friend CP the Fanchise. Guys, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. We'll definitely see you soon. We're going to move on now to Matt Spenley, my buddy who's with me for the Talkback, where we get into your questions that you have for us, and we're excited to get to it. Matt, what's going on?
Ian, what's up? How are you? How's everything going?
I'm good, my friend. How about you?
Can't complain. Basketball season's getting down, baseball season winding down, football. We don't need to talk about football. We don't need to talk about football in this town. We've seen better days there. All right, so a couple questions off the bat, and I want to start with one, because you guys were talking a little bit about how the rules have been working. And I think I'm watching last night, and I want to know from your perspective kind of what's the biggest issue offensively in the non-Brunson Cat division. Because I thought yesterday, OG Anunoby, his aggression offensively, Mikal Bridges, they didn't necessarily get as many threes yesterday, but obviously some of their work inside the arc and that aggression and finding those shots in the mid-range I thought worked really well. So what have you seen from the offense, and what can we look for besides that Brunson Cat dynamic that's going to take some time to figure out?
Yeah, I think you see Bridges, right? We made a lot of his shot, or people made a lot of his shot as shooting form early in the season. And then he came out on a tear going back to the second half of that Boston game. Obviously, his shot is fine. I think you do need him to be among those taking more three-pointers. But Bridges in the mid-range has been very good and very effective. So that's a weapon that's going to be there for them all year long. And Anunoby, I mean, whether it's pulling up for a contested jump shot or coming in off the dribble and shooting a mid-range or getting all the way to the basket, I think his game has evolved offensively, and he's doing things here that maybe you didn't see that much in Toronto. Even with this low usage role that he's in, he's been very impactful. But I think by and large, if you take Brunson and you take Cat out of the conversation, you're wondering, what happens off the bench here? Is it McBride giving you points every night off the bench? Is it someone else? Is it Campaign? Where are your points coming off the bench? And then Josh Hart, how does he fit into the ecosystem of this starting five? I think it's gone fairly well for Hart so far. It's going to be a new role for him, fewer shots, but I think he's taken advantage defensively, creating opportunities for himself, loose ball situations, rebounds. He's been pretty good so far through these 3 games.
And as we're talking about all these guys too, Ian, we've seen, I think more than even the past couple of years, when we've seen Tom Thibodeau like to have his rotation, his set, his guys. I think every game this year so far, there's been a guy that's come off the bench that kind of makes you raise your eyebrow and go, all right, I guess that guy's getting minutes tonight. Against Boston, it was Dadier. Last night, you guys talked about Hook Porty. So I think they're going to continue to kind of feel all this out. It's so early in the season, right? You guys were talking about it too. It's going to take them time.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, let's take a look December 15th or Thanksgiving and see what you've seen trend-wise at that point. I really think also, you talk about what moves may be coming. Mitchell Robinson, what are they going to do there? I think a lot of it depends on how this group looks end of November, early December. What's working? What isn't working? If the defense is struggling on the interior, then maybe you're more apt to hold on to a Mitchell Robinson. If the defense is struggling in the second unit with whoever your backup big is, maybe you're more apt to be aggressive and trying to go out and get some of the big guys that you were interested in the offseason, whether it was a Valanciunas, a Capella, a Kessler, something of that nature, Nick Richards. But I think, this period is going to be big for assessing what the next moves need to be. And I think in some ways they may become obvious over these next few weeks. But yeah, it's too early to make any broad brush statements about the group, especially with Brunson and Towns. I think Brunson, he takes his craft so seriously, and he obviously wants this to work, as do all the guys. But I think Brunson in particular, he's going to make the necessary adjustments to make this thing work on offense, to make Towns be the most dangerous weapon that he could be for the Knicks offensively. That I don't think should be a big concern at this point.
Yeah, and given those guys' track record and, like you said, their work ethic, I think we can expect that. You mentioned Towns offensively, and I want to shift a little bit just defensively. And obviously there was a lot of discussion about how the roster would change as he's added, and obviously with how involved and how much you kind of know about what's going on with the Knicks, discussions that were had within the team as they added Towns. George on YouTube was saying no one fears Cat in the league when it comes to defense. And we spent a lot of this conversation talking about rim protection, Cat's defense in general. Do you think that, again, we're going to always couch these things and say it's early, but just defensively with the Knicks, do you think they had expected to maybe take a little bit of a step back defensively and that would be worth it for the offensive upside? Do you think they saw something in Towns defensively that maybe they could unlock? Like, how do you kind of think that they saw that playing out as they added him to the fold?
I think just if you caught them in an honest moment, I think they would say, yes, we're willing to take a little bit of a hit defensively because of what Towns can do for us on offense, spreading the floor, spreading the defense, creating more space for our guys to operate in, and obviously a threat from the perimeter. And so I do think that, if it's not a press conference setting and if it's a more honest moment, that's probably what you would get from these guys. But I thought it was interesting that Kenny Atkinson said before the game that he thought Towns was much better defensively now than he was, his first couple of years in the league. However, you look at what Minnesota did, right? They made a huge trade for Rudy Gobert, in part because of Gobert's strength as a defensive anchor. And that was something that, obviously Towns wasn't giving them enough of. What you think, though, is functionally with this defense, with Anunoby, with Bridges, with Hart, with McBride, how do you mix and match and to really get stops where it counts, right? I was talking to somebody who was around this team a lot a couple weeks ago about this. He said, listen, offensively, I think the Knicks will be fine. Defensively, yeah, maybe they'll take a hit, but there's enough there for them to get stops late in close games when you really need them to win ball games. And that didn't happen, right? Monday against Cleveland, the Knicks really kind of, I don't want to say they let the rope go, but they struggled defensively in the fourth quarter. But by and large, I think the Knicks feel like the talent is there to get these stops when you need them, even post-Towns trade.
And I think as 3 games into the season, as they start to figure things out, I was laughing. I saw our graphic from last year that was kind of our Knicks hype graphic for the season. And on there you had Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle. You look at how much has changed over the course of a year, not only with the roster, but just how they're going to learn to play with each other. It's going to be so different as we get to the spring. So, Ian, my last question is kind of a fun one for you because I don't know if we've ever asked you this question on the show. What is your favorite current New York Knicks uniform? When they're wearing that uniform, you're like, they look sharp tonight out on the floor. So we got, obviously, they wore the ones last night. They got their normal white, their normal blue. What's kind of your favorite ones these days?
Man, I'm such an old man, Spenley. I can't get into the.
That's why we need your take.
The Sunday uniforms, the city editions. Nothing really. Nothing hits me like the old Knick uniforms. I'm talking about the mid '90s, those early '90s uniforms. So I like the simplicity, and so I do like that basic blue. I just wish the NBA would go back to the traditional white and non-white jerseys, white home, colored on the colored jersey on the road. It just gets so mixed up in the league. I understand they need to sell jerseys. They need to draw eyeballs. I get it. I guess I'm just a traditionalist in that way, but I do really like that simple Knick jersey, the white homes and the road blues. And I wish we could see those more often just from an aesthetic standpoint. Matt, where do you stand on that as a younger, hipper gentleman?
Let me represent my generation here. We're probably not that far apart in age, Ian. I'm the same as you, honestly. I think that we get a little carried away with all of the different versions of jerseys. When I flip on the TV and they have their very basic white New York jerseys on, I'm just like, okay, love how this looks. Feel like it's clean, gets the job done. I was never as big a fan of the late 90s, early 2000s with the black trimming. But the more and more that they've kind of added it back as they've worked it into some of the city edition and the alternates, I get it. I get the nostalgia of it, and I agree with you. So that's my 2 cents, and that's what I got for you today, on Talkback.
That's why we're here, right, to break down the fashion in the league. But Matt, thank you for your help here with the questions, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. That'll do it for us, this edition of the Putback. We'll be back with you guys soon next month, so please keep the questions coming. We'll also have some mailbags coming soon, so we'll be taking questions there as well. And we look forward to seeing how this thing unfolds with you guys as we move forward. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.